Have you found your dream job as a developer? Or are you stuck in an unfulfilling job? On WeAreDevelopers.com, you find over 1,000 jobs in Europe that fit the tech stack that you want to work with, and salaries go up to $130K. All you have to do is create a free profile, and you automatically get matched with jobs that fit your requirements. So what are you waiting for? Create your free profile and let companies apply to you now.
Zeiss. I think you should go to Zeiss.
Zeiss Digital Partners.
Be amazed of knowledge, industries, manufacturing, optics, hardware, software,
AR, VR,
Machine Learning,
infrastructure.
Ich will nicht aufstehen und irgendwie mir denken, scheiße, ich muss meinen Job machen, sondern was kann ich heute machen?
You will make it happen. Do it.
Welcome back, everyone. Now, some people believe everything is a remix, and some of the cynical people here in the room might believe that everything's a copy. But I think that one thing is definitely something that we can say for certain, and that everything was inspired by something else. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants, and in a moment I'm going to introduce to you one of the absolute giants of the web world. I was working together with Tim Berners-Lee and in the very early days of the World Wide Web, and he is the creator of CSS. He also used to be the CTO of Opera, and he is also the chairman of YesLogic. And we're going to look at some of his inspirations for CSS. And we're going full circle because he is actually implementing some of his inspirations back in CSS. So it's a lovely remix all around. Now we're going to see some of Edward Tufte's work, which was the inspiration. Hands up, who knows about Edward Tufte? So there's a couple of us. I'm impressed with you. I didn't, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of designs Edward created, and I'm of course looking forward to introducing to you the creator of CSS, the one and only Hakon VM Lee. Give it up for Hakon! Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's great to see people again. It's great to be here. I brought with me the book, one of Edward Tufte's book. I saw that all of you didn't know about him. He's quite famous in some circles because of the things he do with his books. I'm going to show you some good, nice screenshots, book shots, that is, and show you how you can develop this yourself using CSS and a tiny little bit of JavaScript, I had to admit. Why is this important for you? Well, I think books are important. They are kind of what our civilizations are based on. The laws, for example. We keep them on our shelves. Does this matter to you financially, job-wise? Well, I think the next time you need, for example, a printed publication of any kind, a brochure, or even a book, you can do this yourself with the tools you know, HTML, CSS, and a tiny bit of JavaScript. And you don't have to hire that expensive designer with InDesign or whatever. So I think this is meaningful. At least it's been meaningful for me while doing CSS. This book I bought as a grad student before the web was invented. And then the web came along, and this is where the web started. This is CERN, of course, where Tim Berners-Lee had his office. These are giant machines here. This is an underground detector. You can see the scale of things with this man standing here. But of course, maybe even more important than those small particles at CERN is what Tim did in the computer lab, inventing the web. And he, in the course of a couple of months, he invented 3 of the concepts we still use today, the concept of HTML, HTTP, and URLs. That was just amazing creativity. But one of the things he didn't do, he sort of had it on his mind, I think, was to improve the visual presentation of things. Because this is what the web looked like in 1993 when I discovered it. And, Mosaic, we thought this was great. You could click on a hyperlink and be taken to somewhere else in the world. Fantastic stuff. But the visual presentation is, after a few months of use, is rather boring. You could set the font size and the colors, but only for the browser. You could tell the browser to show it with a white background, for example, but then all pages turn black and white. And when designers came to the web, they wanted to say something about fonts and colors. They came from the world of PCs and Macs, and they had laser printers. They had fonts, and they wanted to take that along, and they started threatening us almost and say, unless we find a way to do fonts and typography on the web, we will start using images. We will make pictures of text. And of course, as you know, that is not how we should do things. So I developed a proposal called at the time Cascading HTML style sheets. We dropped the HTML after a few rounds of discussion, but this was the proposal that was put forward in 1994, and this was kind of a bridge between the scientific world at CERN, where they had organized, information, it was structured, it was headlines, it was list items, all the tags we know from HTML, and then combine that with the visual richness of what the designers wanted to do. So this little language called CSS borrowed from the world of typography. For example, the concept of fonts and colors and margins and padding and all that. These are things that we didn't really invent ourselves, but we put it into a small little language. We took the names from a rich typographic tradition. And this, as you might have guessed, is a printing press, which was invented in Germany in the 1400s by Gutenberg. And his invention did more things than any other invention, except the web, I think. It totally changed the way we had access to information in Europe in the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, etc. So in Europe, we saw a lot of development like the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Industrial Revolution. None of that would have happened without the printing press. And I think Germany is good to honor their inventor, this fantastic, you see the scale of it? It's almost as big as CERN's detector. You see it? Yeah, the man here. Fantastic stack of books. It's only German authors there, otherwise I think Tufte would have had a place there. So, moving over to his book, this is a well-worn copy. And the reason why this has inspired me is that because it's a revelation to open these books. This is, just one out of many pages. You have text there, beautifully laid out, beautiful fonts, with notes on the side. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go and read the side notes. There's also figures that, make this into a sort of a coffee table book as well. You don't really have to read it. You can just browse through it, look at the pictures if you want. And this is consistent. This is not just a one-off thing. He has dedicated his whole career to making these kinds of books about how to present information, infographics. So is it possible to do this in CSS? Well, we can start by looking at some of the easier things. I assume you all know roughly what CSS can do for your screens. There's also a part in CSS that does pagination, paged media. So from CSS2 on, we could do things like set the page size to be A4. That's an easy one, or to letter in the US terminology. Tufte's books don't use these sizes. Most books don't. They have specific millimeter. So here's what the Tufte's one-liner. This basically creates the size of these sheets. So that's an easy one. And then we can set the page margins, which is also a very basic measurement, which I do in millimeters here. You can, of course, use inches and other units if you prefer. Page numbers is also quite doable and have been. I think browsers even support page numbers now. I say even. Browsers haven't been very good at doing printing. I was the CTO at Opera for 18 years, and I couldn't convince my programmers to spend any meaningful time on printing, and probably rightly so, because customers didn't really care. So there are specific tools for generating PDF documents from HTML and CSS. I represent one of them called Prints, but I'll show you a list of some of the others as well. I do think that there will be more of this, and I do think that we will see a shift of production over to using web format. That's the only way that we can have books survive, I think, because books are really inefficient because they had to be printed, distributed, sold in bookstores. You can, of course, order on Amazon and things, but they will go away unless we find easier way to make them. You can't really use Word or InDesign or any of these specific tools. The only way for the books to survive, I think, is to start making them from HTML and CSS using common web formats. But they should look just as good as the books that we have, the best examples we have. We should be able to do high-end typography from the web, and that's what this is about. All right, we do page counters. That's quite easy. But then we look at the top of this page here where the page number is, and we see that, okay, so that's the page counter there. But then it also has a running header. Concept of a running header, this is known in typography. This shows, it prints the title of the book is shown on the left pages. And then on the right pages, you show the title of the chapter. So can we do this in CSS? Yes, this is actually quite easy. We set on left pages, in the top left corner, we set the content to be first the page number, and then to be a string called chapter. And that chapter, actually that's an error, it should have said title there. It's the book title. And then we set the value of this string with the string set property. This is probably properties that you don't use so much, but they are in there. They're in specifications and they are in implementations, and they're quite easy to reach. So using those, we can do the basic page layout, the margins, and the page numbers. But then the fun starts. Here, the figure. Figures are hard. Figures is what, that's what this book is all about. We need to be able to do figures. And secondly, we need to do side notes, that thing on the side there. We need to be able to push things over. And there are several ways in CSS to push things over. You can use table layout, grids, flexbox, there's many, but none of them have solved it in a way that makes sense on a piece of paper, because the paper sheet is cut. It's not a scroll, you know. This is where the Romans, when they started making books by cutting sheets, by cutting scrolls into sheets, they made it much easier to move books from one place or the other. They made it possible to stack them in libraries like the one they had in Alexandria. It was a fantastic invention to start making pages. But when it comes to layout, it's difficult because you don't want that figure to be split across 2 pages, for example. And you want that side note there to be conscious of where it is. You want to be able to say, maybe it should move to the bottom of the page. So pages are challenging. So what we're introducing now, what I'm looking at together with some developers and a group of people on Twitter and other places, is to add to CSS floats. You know the float that we've been having this, we've been using this from CSS1. Float right you can set an image to float left. What we're introducing now is just a few more keywords: float top, float bottom. And this means these are page floats, so they float not to the top of the document, but to the top of the page. So that means we can quite easily say, you know, here's an image. From its anchoring point, make it float to the top of the page. Sounds easy, right? Good. We'll go on to the next one, the side note. How do we do side notes? We introduce side note areas. That's the current idea. Again, this is up for discussions. If you're interested in participating in this, this is the right time to be. So to explain side notes, we start off with the page. The white rectangle here is the paper sheet. And then we have kind of the body element, the gray one. That's where we pour our content into. And when we declare a side note area, we say that part of that content area should be reserved for notes. Okay? And that note area corresponds to where, in this example, where Tufte places his notes, right? So we carefully position them, and it's easy to describe them. We're in the at page selector again, and we say just there's going to be a right note with a width of 55 millimeter. And then we can easily say the aside element, one of the new elements in HTML5, we float it to the right note. So float is getting a bunch of new keywords here. You remember top, bottom, and here comes right note. Obviously there's a left note too. There's various combinations of these things, but I'm showing you what we need to do in order to produce the Tufte layout here. And as I said, some of these notes, you want them to go to the bottom of the side note area, then you just add the keyword bottom. So it's quite intuitive. This is the way CSS properties have been designed from the beginning. They should be intuitive. You should know roughly what's going on here just by reading that code. Even if you haven't done this design, you would know how to make the note area appear on the left. And you would know how to make the side note float to the top. I'm sure all of you would have been able to edit this style sheet to get to things like this. Okay, but it's not quite solved yet. We have some conflicts. As you see, the figure at the bottom of this page, it's wide. It covers the whole content area. And then we have the side note area, which in principle covers the whole side. So at the bottom right corner there's a conflict where that horse is standing. Who should win here? Again, a simple solution is we're going to do the page floats first. We're going to let that green box take its place. It will eat away from the side note area, because you don't really want side notes where you have a top or bottom floating figure. You want those horses to take up that space, and then after they have been placed there, you put the side notes in. So that's the simple conflict resolution. That leaves less space for side notes, and some of the issues, we could end up with there being too many side notes here, for example. The implementation will try to put all side notes on the page where they are referenced, but they could also move to the next page if necessary. Just like we've been doing with footnotes in the tradition of typography. If there isn't room on the current page, you continue in the footnote area on the next page. So we borrow from a rich tradition here. We saw those white horses. They were taking up more space than the text flow. And to specify that, we tell them to float to the bottom and to be wide. That's a keyword. We could have specified 55 millimeters there, for example, but it's easier to say just, take up all the space, be wide, take up whatever is available. Then you don't have to remember that the side note area has a width of 55 millimeters. And of course, if you change that width later, if your design changes and you can't use that much space for notes, then you just change this and everything just happens automatically. All right, so let's go on. Let's look at a PDF page which has been generated this way. This is a synthetic page that I made just a few minutes before my presentation started. I fixed a few errors here. I'm going to show it in a PDF viewer. I'm running this live here now. Let's see if we can get this to be, oops. So, okay, so here you can see that this is selectable text. So this is actually a PDF document which has been generated just from CSS and HTML. And you can see these figures that we're putting in here. This is typical of something that Tufte could do. I'm not using his text and images, obviously, for copyright reasons, but it's very much a Tufte lookalike here, where he, makes, he pulls you in as a reader. He wants you to look at that map. Where is that map really? Is it really a map? Is it a real place? Interesting. Okay. So what you saw there in the previous page, you also saw a spread. Here's another one. This is a real spread. This is just a photograph of his book laying open. And you can see that he's taken a painting and he has made it go over the full spread. So the spread is the technical term for a left and right page. So how do we do this? Well, we could do, an image editor. We could split the JPEG file into two, one left and one right, and you can float one on one side and the other on the other side. That's possible. But it's much cuter, I think, the way we can do this with, and here's the page, with CSS. Here we're only using one file. It's the same JPEG file, which is seen both on the left and the right page. But they are two different pages. How do we do this? Well, it's a little hack. And we can see it more easily in this. This is not Tufte-like design. This is more a magazine layout design. But again, we have a left and a right page. And the hack is to have the H1 element there twice with the same content. Spreading over two pages appears twice in the markup. And one, we say, should appear on the left side, and it floats to the top. And we make it overly wide so that it goes outside of the sheet. And we do the same on the left page. We float it to the top of the page, and we make it overly wide, sticking out on the left side. So that means we're looking at two halves here, which together form one heading. And with the goose, you can see that it's the same. We have actually repeated part of it. You see the beak there. It's not a split. You can see that little hole appear on both pages because in the fold, sometimes content disappears a little. So you want to have a little bit of repetition there. So that's again done with the same technique. It's a little bit of a hack. We don't really like to repeat content that way. It should have been possible to do this without, but I don't have any better ways right now. But I think it works fairly well. Another thing we must be looking at when looking at Tufte's design is optical alignment. And optical alignment means that you, as a human, must look at how this works. And here's one of his pages again, and you can see that the side note area is quite clearly defined by the text. But then you have the rhinoceros, and his horn is coming out on the side. So it's sticking out a little too far to the right, is it? Or is it right? I don't know what process went on in his head when he designed this, but it's quite common for human designers when they see that something, looks a little, even if math tells us it's in the right place, if it looks like it should be a little further out, we'll make it a little further out, even if it sticks out. So I think the horn here is sticking out, but because there's so much white in the figure, it looks okay that way. But this is a human decision, and I think it's very hard to replicate these things. So to answer my question in the title, is it possible to recreate these designs? I think we can get very close, but I think there will be a level of human craft still. Or maybe we can convince computers to evaluate this picture and see. Maybe that's an AI topic we should be looking at. I don't know. We're not quite there yet. But as I go through his designs, I see that he spent a lot of time with minuscule alignment that sometimes looks like errors, but mostly it looks good. While printing has been the main focus of my work, we should also consider viewing this on screen. And I could take the same CSS and HTML file here. This is all available from css4.pub, by the way, the URL I showed at the beginning. You can find the HTML files there. And we're going to try and see what it looks like as seen in a normal browser. So this is exactly the same HTML file. It's a different style sheet. And here we also will see some JavaScript code. So you can see that we're able to get the figures working, put them on the side. When things go small, on small screens, we don't have room for side notes anymore. And you saw what happened there. It actually removed the side notes and instead added a little dot here. And when I press here, you can see that the side note comes in from the side there. This is an idea I borrowed from a project called Tufte CSS. So there is an existing project. People have been trying to do this before for screen-based use. My approach is a little different, though. I'm using a little bit of JavaScript here to add those button elements, all those small little pesky things that we need to have in order to start, in order to get the interaction from this one. So in this HTML code, you can just do figure element. You don't have to do any buttons. You don't have to do anything. But at the top, you just call this little script that will add this. I think that's a way of saving authors from having to deal with things they shouldn't really be dealing with. I'm also using JavaScript for a few other things. I had to admit, this is my way of saying, maybe we need to do even more work in CSS. I like JavaScript in a way. It saves us from a lot of things. But as we heard earlier today, you shouldn't use it unless you had to. Here I had to. I had to add a little element here. When I moved the span over to the side note, where it starts with latex, I can add this counter here easily in CSS, but I couldn't leave the remainder there, the call. So there I had to use a little JavaScript as well. I'm also using JavaScript to adjust the size of images. Baseline alignment is very important in typography, and if you have an image that appears and that image hasn't been sized as a multiple of the line height, you will disrupt the rhythm of your lines. This is not something you care about when you print out anything, but it is something that book publishers care about. So adjusting that image. We could easily add this to CSS as well, saying that, an object should be a multiple of a certain distance. So it's purely a declarative thing, but we just haven't had use for it enough yet. I also create a table of contents automatically and an index, so that's not something the author had to deal with. Okay, I'm running towards the end. I'm going to show you one quick thing. It's very cool, I think. Text replacements. Okay, so again, we're in high quality typography, but we only have a normal keyboard word. So the French term mais oui is often typed in like this on a keyboard, and I use 2 dashes to show, I really want a long line here, but I don't have that on my keyboard. But I want to transform that mais oui into the long line, and I can do that with CSS by using these fantastic Unicode characters that are in there. So here's the CSS code. I use a property called text replace. Again, it's not supported by browsers, but it's supported by those that make PDF output. So here I say I want to replace this string with Unicode code point 214, which is the M dash. And I can do the same here. Again, 2 dashes, and then I add 2008. These are hex codes, terrible to remember, but this is punctuation space. And I can also add a little bit of space before the exclamation mark. This is the narrow no-break space. So you can see this. If you look here, my 2 dashes have turned into one long one, and then I've added a little bit of space. This is what the French would do, and even here. And then I've kind of abused the property. I've changed it from, it's very powerful. You can change all occurrences of yes in a document to no. So, scary stuff. This is really what you shouldn't be using CSS for. Don't tell anyone. Okay. Here are some tools to create PDF files. I'm almost at the end here. Here's the URL if you want to look at the document. It's all there. I have one challenge, 15-second challenge. You all are interesting. You have something you should tell your family, your kids, the world, your colleagues. You should really write a book. You should write a book, you should find the figures, take the photographs, and put this into something that you bind together, you print, and you give it as birthday gifts or Christmas presents, whatever. I think that would make the world more interesting, and I think it would make your life more interesting, and it would make me very happy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I've never wanted to write a book more than now.
You should.
My entire life. I'll get cracking the moment I get home. Thank you again.
Very
Another
good.
round of applause for Håkon V. and Lee, please.
Thank you.
I know most of us are eternally grateful for his work in the past and his continued work. It's great to be able to build on top of that. Now, speaking of work, if you're like, do you know what, my job kind of sucks a little bit, feel free to sign up to the WeAreDeveloper job platform, and I'm sure you'll get a new job in no time. Now, we are going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with some computer games. Ooh, what could that be? See you in a bit.